Hello, 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 dear readers, and welcome to another chapter reaction with Christine E. Schulze, your favorite elvish author of young adult fantasy. And as you can see today, I'm sporting my red cape a cloak rather, I should call it, because we're going to be reading from my book, Bloodmaiden. So Bloodmaiden is one of my young adult fantasy books. It's part of the, this is actually an older cover because I guess I don't have one of the newer ones on hand right now. But Bloodmaiden, if you happen to look on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever, you'll notice is part of a collection called the Amielian Legends. Now, the Amielian Legends are all standalones. They do take place in the same fantastical universe. So if you start to read them, you might notice a little bit of crossovers of characters or worlds or places. But they can each be read completely separately in any order. The only exception to this is the first in the collection, Larimar, Gem of the Sea, which is really more of a short novella, short story, will be getting a full-length sequel. But even with that, you wouldn't necessarily have to read Larimar in order to read the sequel. And that'll be coming hopefully in the next couple of months. That's something that I'm working with my editor right now. But yeah, we're gonna be reading from Bloodmaiden. So, like I said, I got my red cloak, just like our main character here. In Bloodmaiden, there are these 4 dynasties with dragons and humans, these various dragon and human races, and they're meant to live in harmony with one another. And they have for, many, many years. But unfortunately, there's this one dragon dynasty that has gone back to these really dark traditions. And there is a young girl named Crisilin and her childhood sweetheart Shalom, and they set out to try to escape the dynasty of Tainan, where all these horrible things are happening, to go rally the aid of the other dragon dynasties and see if they'll implore them to help them to end this horrible dark tradition. But before they can even escape, escaping itself is going to be no small feat. They're heavily guarded. And then even to get out of Tainan, you have to cross this ever-white lake that's just, constant snowstorm, constant ice. You can't even see where you're going. Not to mention that I'm sure if they try to escape, someone's going to try to pursue them. So this is meant to be a, little bit suspenseful, young adult, fantasy, adventure book with definitely some heavy romance elements between Crisilin and Shalom. I would definitely call this a sweet romance. They're pretty young and there's nothing... nothing heavy, nothing of a sexual nature in here really. But yeah, if you like kind of more whimsical stories, as you can see on the walls behind me, I'm very into Zelda. It's my favorite gaming series, and this book was actually a little bit inspired by Zelda. The world is set up with this big field in the middle and then these 4 regions surrounding it. So I was kind of inspired by Majora's Mask and the way that geography is set up when I wrote it. And then also this book is inspired by Chains of Gold by Nancy Springer, which is a little bit of, a more older fantasy. But in reading that book, it just really gave me the ideas for, some kind of horrible sacrifice or ritual that characters need to escape from. And also the other thing is I had never done a dragon book before, and I had already, written about vampires and genies and banshees and given them my own twist in the Strigoni sequence. And so I thought to myself, Christine E. Schulze, you have never written a book with dragons. But if you're going to write a book with dragons, you may as well do it with your own twist, which is how I came up with the dragon dynasties. And, each of the dragons have their own powers and their own magic and live in a completely, different region that just really, kind of goes along with their personalities and everything. So yeah, we're just going to hop in. We're going to read Bloodmaiden. We're going to start with part 1. There are 2 parts. And we'll probably read a couple chapters because the first one is quite short. It's more of an introductory chapter to really set things up for you. So yeah, so again, this won't be a reaction per se for me because I'm the author, so I've obviously read this book. But I would be thrilled to hear your reactions to this reading and this video down in the comments below. On that note, we are actually going to finally start. So strap on your elf ears and get ready to listen to Bloodmaiden. Chapter 1, Tainan. In Sulaimon, 4 kingdoms stretched to the 4 corners of its vast terrain, each ruled and guarded by 4 dragon dynasties. To the east, the Zale dynasty hovers on an island not far from the ocean coast. The serpentine, blue-gilded dragons of Zale catch fish and rabbits for the island people, and free the surrounding waters of sharks and other dangerous creatures. Serene by nature, the Zale dragons spend much time in meditation, studying peace and charity toward all. Thus, they require from their human inhabitants the lightest of the yearly tributes. In exchange for care and protection, the dragons of Zale oblige only to share in an annual celebration with their humans filled with many days of feasting and music. To the south, the Gauthier dynasty looms atop the snow-capped Valther Mountains. Unlike the elegant eastern palace clad in golden silks, the Gauthier fortress is a solid stone structure, the strongest in all Sulaimon. Though the Gauthier dragons delight in the thrill of battle, they do not war needlessly. Instead, they satisfy their warrior spirits by holding aggressive sport tournaments, and by protecting their humans from mountain lions and other beasts. They also quarry great rocks, minerals, and other precious gems which their human architects use to strengthen their fortress, and the blacksmiths craft into great armor, weapons, and other treasures. The finest of these comprises the Gauthier dragon's annual tribute. Varden lies to the west, in a deep and evergreen valley. Both the dragons and humans inhabiting that land possess a gift in making things grow. The dragons are covered with scales that fertilize the soil with rich nutrients, helping the crops grow lush, strong, and full, and endowing many of their humans with exceptional long life and intelligence. The tribute that Vardinian dragons require is an annual portion of their people's bountiful harvest. For me, these three dynasties have always sounded like something out of an ancient myth or fairy tale from another world. The concept of humans and dragons helping and living in harmony with one another, without fear, is a distant dream only read of, told of secretly, and quietly yearned for. I live in Tainan, the fourth dynasty, where the dragons do provide much protection, and there is much need of it. Our dynasty is set high in the northern mountains, where wild animals and avalanches ever reign. But the tribute required by the dragons of Tainan is so horrible, no one speaks of it. I cannot even utter it here, now, on paper. My fingers tremble, scrawling nervous, illegible scribbles across the pages signifying the last days of my life, as the unspoken truth grows realer, closer, and more unbearably frightening. I am the new Cuelda of Tainan. Chapter 2. Cuelda. Someone knocks. I look up abruptly and let my feather pen fall on the desk. Zephyr, a man of my own Tainanian race, appears inside. He runs a hand through his thick dark hair, and his gaze diverts from mine. His skin, which reflects the bluish tint customary for our people, pales with the same fear pulsing through me like a drum. I glance briefly into the mirror, reflecting upon my own skin, pale as the moon, and my hair that flows in long waves of gold. Such traits are a rarity among our people and considered a sign of greatest purity, and perhaps the greatest reason why I sit in this room right now, awaiting my dark fate. It is time, my Lady Crisilin, Zephyr mutters. He continues to avoid my gaze and looks like he'd rather be struck mute than deliver this simple but ominous message. I do not blame him. Neither of us possesses any choice in the fate rapidly approaching. It's my Cuelda, I correct kindly, and then add, I remind you only for your own protection. I am no longer Crisilin. That name has become blasphemy, unless used by the man who will soon be my husband. As if reading my mind, Zephyr asks, Are you afraid of meeting him? I shake my head, lying gracefully. Maybe if I don't display fear, I won't feel its sting as strongly. Fear won't spare me anyway, only make this experience worse. I need to find an ally in my new husband, not another enemy. I hear that he is a kind young man, a man of true innocence and purity like yourself. Zephyr's voice has turned mechanical, though he stammers a little as he adds, a true honor to wed and lie with. I nod stiffly. Indeed, a true honor. To belong to a man I do not even know. I never gave it much thought, but our race's custom has always been to marry at an excessively early age compared to the other three dynasties. Marriage in Tainan seems even more ludicrously early now that I am one of its chosen victims. I do thank you for looking out for me, Zephyr adds quietly, and I commend you for having the ability to even think of me, my Cuelda. You are a brave girl. If I had not had my own children to think of, I would take on your bravery, call you by your rightful name, and risk death without fear. I know, Zephyr, and thank you. I stand and place a hand on his shoulder, wishing I could comfort him. After all, he has faithfully replenished food, drink, books, paper, ink, whatever I've needed or wanted during the past 7 days I've spent cooped up in my lavish new quarters. He lingers a few moments more, and tears fill his eyes. Nothing I can say can erase or even ease his pain. An unspoken wish hangs between us. We long to freeze this moment in place so that we don't have to continue to the next. Finally, fearing that lingering any longer will get him in trouble, I remind him, it is time to fire. He takes a deep breath, grants a solitary nod, then turns and disappears silently down the hallway. I follow on noiseless bare feet. We wind up and down familiar corridors. Our path quickly leads us to my first stop, the spinning room. I spin it. A small piano-like instrument sits in the midst of mountains of straw piled so high that they brush the top of the ornately carved ceiling. The spinet is imbued with the dragon's magic, allowing its music to spin materials such as straw into golden cloth. Spinning straw into gold is one of the powers granted by the Tainanian dragons to the Cuelda alone. She is to spin straw into gold for 1 hour every day during her reign. When the last of the straw is spun, her rule ends. The straw always lasts for about 9 to 12 months, depending. I wish creating gold was all their tribute requires. Just a side note, that reminds me that another inspiration for this story was Rumpelstiltskin. This book definitely has a very dark, fairy tale-esque feel to it, like you go further on. And now back to the story. I take my seat and start playing a melancholy tune. Some of the straw dances midair, steadily weaving itself into the golden cloth I'd already begun a few days past. My fingers shake. I do not merely spin straw into gold. I craft the fibers of the gown that will bear me to my death. I would say my funeral, but nothing will remain of me, save perhaps a few shreds of gold stained with red. The hour that usually drags by flees like a fragile vapor this evening. The marriage so rapidly careening toward me will mark the beginning of my life's end, and with a complete stranger. Will I even like him? Will I learn to love him in the short expanse of time granted to us? I want to. I want to have that experience of finding love before I die, though I'm not sure if loving him would make it easier or harder in the end. Maybe worrying about whether I will love him, out of all the things about to happen, seems bizarre, even a bit crazy. And yet, despite all the inhuman things being thrust upon me, I find that I cannot entirely numb myself to all human fears, hopes, and dreams. The door opens with a gentle creak, as if the person beyond tries to break the hard news softly to me. The door's groaning reflects my agony, and the person's slow movements grant me a few more precious moments. I cease playing, stand, and look up as the person enters. A long gray cape and hood conceal her entire body and face. She is my aunt, Simone, the tallest servant in the palace. None of the other women come close to her 6 feet and 2 inches. But even though I know it's her, she cannot reveal herself during the ceremony. I must see no one's eyes from the gold spinning tonight till when I meet my husband. She must not speak either, but she lowers her hooded head in what I understand is a nod. I nod back and follow her from the room. We traverse several corridors, and I glance out the many arched windows we pass. It is a black night, as is every night on this mountain. However, tonight, bright stars shine with uncommon brightness in the black, reflecting what should be a glorious experience, and, in the same breath, mocking it with an almost tangible laughter. We enter a room where several more women concealed in gray cloaks cluster around a circular ivory pool of water. They all nod to it, and I step in. Cold waves shock my bare feet, shooting through the rest of my body and providing no comfort from the frigid wind blowing through the open window. The Cuelda must learn to be strong and suffer trials with humility and meekness. I frown. Why should I want to be humble for those who put me here? Of course, the servant women are not to blame. They have little more freedom than I, and even less say. Thus, I obey their series of nods and hand gestures and other silent commands. The loose robe and gown slips from my body. I am certain not to touch the cloth into the water, lest it should need to be purified all over again. I wonder if the woman would really take the long, toilsome hours necessary to repeat the purifying ritual for some simple and harmless mistake. Would the dragons really ever know? I don't try anything out of line. The Cuelda is sacred. She cannot be punished, and I would not wish for these innocents to be punished in my stead. I allow the women to scrub every inch of my body. The water wafts a scent filled with many different flowers and minerals, stirring memories of running through fields, collecting stones, weaving flowery necklaces with him. No, he is as dead to me now as I am to the outside world. I must focus only on the task at hand and the other who will soon become my only he. I must numb myself to all else. At first, scrubbed raw and unable to control my extreme shivering, I am given a nod to come out of the tub. I step carefully into satin slippers. My feet must not touch anything else until my husband removes them. And several women come forward to dry and then clad me in another gown, pure white silk, and another robe of the same. Both are richly embroidered, but beyond that, simple and not very warm. The dress is more like a night dress than a wedding gown, but it's white, so I suppose it serves both functions. The lack of undergarments feels strange, but maybe their absence is made to encourage the marriage's only true purpose. For me, it only serves as a constant, uncomfortable reminder. A blue ribbon ties back my curls. My aunt leads me from the room. We climb a stair and walk down another hall. A silence, not like peace but like death, breathes loudly in the complete hush. I can almost hear it, as if the dragons lurk invisibly nearby, waiting for us to mess up at any second. We reach the end of the hall. Crimson high-arched doors accented with elaborate gold carvings tower before us. One of the dragon's priests stands before the doors in white robes. His lowered balding head hides behind his hood. My aunt turns, leaves me there, and slips so quietly back down the corridor that I don't notice until I turn and see her gliding around the corridor at the hall's far end, out of sight. A sharp aloneness strikes me. I turn back to the priest. He waits a bit, as if assuring we are alone. Then he lights the incense, showers me with white rose petals, sprinkles me with sweet waters, blesses my purity. Another priest somewhere else does the same to my husband. My heart beats faster as this priest slides too quickly through the rituals, joining us in that perfect union. At last, he steps aside and extends his hand toward the doors. Sickness swells in my stomach along with fear. The doors loom large and red like a wall of fire or blood. I don't know which I fear more, what the ceremony signifies in the ending of my childhood and freedom, or the ceremony itself. Now, in this moment, the fear of the former passes away as the latter looms closer, so close that it is now, my dreadful, terrifying, unknown now. I realize why this part is the hardest. I must open the door. I must reach out and grab the cold handle granting my rite of passage into the life I must both embrace and hate. I feel so alone and suddenly strangely yearn for the young man I will meet on the other side. All I want is someone to cling to. I suddenly want him to at least like me, to be kind to me, hold me, maybe even love me, just as much as I suddenly want to do all of these things to him. I want nothing more than to run away from that door, and yet, knowing that I can't, open it and run to him. I reach out, clutch the handle firmly, pull and slip through. As the door shuts behind me, its hollow thud echoes loneliness. I stand in the final stretch, the hall with the blood-red carpet. For that the dragons are obsessed with purity, red is not a very pure color. Perhaps it is meant to encourage the passion that cannot exist between two people who don't even know each other. I force myself to walk down the hall. Panic squeezes my pounding heart so hard that it grows difficult to breathe, to even see clearly. I need to hold on to something, someone. I reach the end of the hall, the final red and golden door. Stumbling to a stop, I grasp the handle and inhale a last deep breath. This is it. This is where I lose my childhood, where I must become someone else, where my now must transform. I open the door. My husband sits on the edge of the large bed, facing away from me and dressed in similar robes. He swings his legs and wrings his hands. A small connection races between us, his fear an instant part of mine, my first small sign of hope of an ally. The second hope comes as he stands to face me. The light of the fireplace illuminates his blue-tinted face, his dark handsome curls, his soulful but troubled dark brown eyes. I gasp, and the sickness of fear churning in my stomach changes to that of relief, wonder, and horror as I breathe. Shalom. Chapter 3. Shalom. Crisilin, he whispers back. Awe weakens my body, and I rush over to collapse on the edge of the bed beside him. He traces my jaw ever so tenderly, as if I am some spirit who might vanish if he dares to touch me too firmly. Torment coupled with relief shines in wondering eyes. Ah, Shalom, my best friend, and my betrothed from birth. It seems bittersweet and strange now that our people dare place hope in betrothals that might be broken if their son or daughter is chosen for the honor of Cuelda or her husband. Indeed, many no longer practice the custom of betrothals because seeing such sacred promises shattered does nothing but further sever the few threads of hope that their fragile hearts yet cling to, hope that peace will be restored to our dynasty. Shalom cups my face in both his hands. He draws near until our bodies press close. Gradually, his fear of my slipping away between his fingers like grains of sand melts from his gaze. My tears come at last. I shudder with this release and clutch the loose silk of his robe. Then I lower my head and bury myself in his chest. Maybe, if we can become one, even for a few moments, I can find escape from this torture. Why must the dragon's curse mar all things beautiful? Shalom is the only man I could ever really love. Yet his fate is now sworn to mine, hopelessly bound. My sobs continue, softly at first. He wraps me in his arms, and then the tears come more ardently. Only when my crying quiets does he speak softly. When I heard you would become the next Cuelda, I entreated the dragons to allow me to become your husband. I said we were already betrothed, that I already loved you with a pure love. They gave me trials to pass through, trial after trial that I thought would never end. Finally, I passed and they appointed me. But as I sat waiting for you now, I was afraid it wouldn't really be you. Of course, I didn't really want it to be you, but I also didn't want to go through the rest of my life, however short, without you. I know that sounds selfish. It's not, I whisper, trembling within the comforting cage of his arms. I'm glad you're here too, even though I shouldn't be. I cry harder as his words sink in. He made this choice for me. As revolted as I am, I can only love him more for his sacrifice. Is this not what I wanted, to be held in the arms of someone who loves me and whom I love? And were our positions reversed, would I not have done anything to assure I could live the rest of my life and die by his side? Please don't be upset, Crisilin. His familiar warm breath tickles my ear. I only did this because I love you, and because I could not live with myself being parted from you, leaving you to suffer alone the rest of your life. I know, I whisper, tucking my head beneath his chin and trying to cuddle closer, though this is impossible unless we become one person. Then, with a small smile, I remember that we are one now. He lifts me in his arms then. I lace my hands around the back of his neck and glance about at our new room. It is not a large room, but the fireplace and a huge canopy bed create a cozy atmosphere. Apart from the bed and a desk with some writing paper, a quill, and ink, it is unfurnished. Perhaps this is also to help keep the Cuelda and her new husband on task. The bed itself is white ivory. Firelight dances rainbow hues upon white silks and satins. Walls gleam a vivid red. No windows exist. I doubt this is for privacy. Our lives are no longer a private matter. He lays me back on the soft bed, and my head nestles into one of the velvety pillows. He lays beside me, and I look up into his eyes. He hovers over me, caresses the tip of my nose with his finger, runs his hands along my cheeks and neck. With each fleeting touch, butterflies flutter in my stomach. A lightheadedness intoxicates my mind, and my breath involuntarily gasps and quickens. He leans his body down and presses close. Our feet kiss beneath the downy covers. Then, for the first time, his lips kiss mine so sweetly. I'd always wondered when this moment came. Well, would I know what to do? But somehow my lips know how to respond. I don't think they would have known how to respond to anyone else's. His lips, body, heart, every part of him has always been not mine, and mine his. He smiles, stroking my hair, and I shakily try to return the smile. We're married, Crisilin, he breathes slowly. You're my wife now. My smile widens into a broad grin. A hot flush touches my cheeks, and I glance away. He utters the word wife as if it is magic, as if it fills him with the greatest awe and joy, as if he could never hold a more valuable treasure than me in his arms. Somehow, even in this place, our marriage, our joining together of bodies, hearts, and souls for all eternity, is still sacred, pure, beautiful, because it is us, Shalom and I. Until morning, nothing else is. But then my thoughts dance upon the hideous dread of the approaching morn, the horror inescapable by the Cuelda. I wonder if, a year from now, when I must go through it myself, the memory of tomorrow will be as horrible as having to suffer the same torment twice. My breath quickens again. Shalom kisses my forehead, strokes my cheeks and hair. I know, I dread it too, but for now, we are together. He kisses me again, longer, more fervently. I kiss back, pulling him toward me. A strange warmth fills my body, an unfamiliar desire. I am not exactly sure what I want, but I know I want him very much. But as I glance up, the red walls taunt, reflecting the pain that must be suffered tomorrow. I don't feel the walls' intended passion, their symbolism of blood rushing to our lips and warmth through our bodies. Instead, I feel the vileness of the dragon's heartless bloodlust. I pull back, and he looks down, face pulled into a frown. Did I do something wrong? No. I glance down and trace the palm of his hand. Not at all. It's just, I don't think I can do this tonight. I glance up again. He smiles sadly, looking disappointed, but he nods. Perhaps he had also hoped that tonight's ceremony could distract him from thoughts of tomorrow. I want to do this when we can focus on each other, I add. We're still very young. We have time, and our first time. It should be special. He nods, and his dark brown eyes shine with sincere agreement. You're right. I'd like the same thing. How wonderful we'll ever really be able to have a truly special experience. We certainly won't tonight. He lies beside me and draws me into his arms. I lay my head upon his strong chest, listening to his heart. It beats with a normal rhythm, as if he's somehow able to calm his in order to soothe mine. Cuddling close, I allow the rhythmic humming and the gentle hugging of his arm around my waist. His other hand curls in my hair to lull me to sleep. With a yawn, I mumble, I wish our first time could be when we are free. We'll be free someday, he assures. I know this, but there will only be one path to that freedom, and it is not the freedom I speak of and yearn for most, nor is it the freedom that permits lovers to be together. My mind erases all dread and fear. I allow it to fade to black, concealing the swirling red images wanting to accost it. As Shalom's heartbeat sings sweetly, the quiet numbness of sleep envelops me in its temporary, deceitful, yet blessed web of peace. Chapter 4. Tradition. I wake in Shalom's arms. His heartbeat and breathing now race wildly, his arms wrapped tensely around mine. The passing of sleep has given way to new wakefulness, granting clearer thoughts of the impending doom. I sit up enough to see his dark gaze fixated on the bed's canopy. Worry shrouds his gaze like clouds shadowing a once placid sea. He turns his head and smiles feebly. Good morning, love. Is it morning? I don't know. He glances about. The fireplace still blazes. Someone must replenish it during the night. But the room offers no natural light. If it is morning, we cannot tell. I feel awake enough for it to be morning, he mutters. But perhaps it's my nerves that have stirred me to such strong wakefulness. I touch his cheek, drawing his face toward mine so that our eyes meet. It will be all right. We'll be together. I lay my head back on his chest and lace my fingers in his. Let us pray for them, that it will happen quickly and that they will not have to endure pain for long. He nods, and his chin gently rubs the top of my head. My heart prays, but my body trembles. I try to quench the grotesque sickness churning in the pit of my stomach. Praying for them means having to think about what we will see and hear and smell. For me, the pungent, bitter smell is the worst. We've seen and heard and smelled it all many times before, but now, this time, things are so changed. Today, we watch our inevitable future. A knock raps too loudly on the door like thunder, and I jump. A voice declares with harsh nonchalance, "It is time. Rise and prepare yourselves for the ceremony." Thick silence drowns us again. I half wish for the awful voice to return. Suddenly, even Shalom's arms aren't enough. Even he cannot symbolize life, only death. Today, everything is death. I shudder, as if death already ensnares me in its long, curled claws. I hug Shalom tighter, closing my eyes like a child trying to shut out a bad dream, but he whispers in my ear, "We have to get up, love. We have to get ready." Even Shalom's voice is too devoid of emotion and meaning, but perhaps that is how all voices are destined to sound today. I rise to obey and dress. I sit inside the Colosseum encompassing the wide circular field and try to block out the frivolous laughter and chatter of hundreds pressed close in their seats. For a moment, I even shut out Shalom's touch, except for his warmth on my hand, like the warmth of the legendary golden fields that used to sprawl across the grassy expanse below. Its grass is now brown and withered, but I remember the stories Aunt Simone used to tell me, stories passed down to her of a lighter, happier time. The goldenrods sway proud and tall on the field of sunlit gold. The dragon slithered onto the field, dancing back and forth. Their blue and white scales gleam in the faintly shining sun. A perfect hush descends upon the crowd who stare as if spellbound. I cannot bear to look at the dragons in the eye. Trying to distract myself, I continue to recall my aunt's legends of the field's ancient splendor. This is the only field in all Sulaimon that once bore golden soil. The breath of the Tainanian dragons provided the moisture and magic needed in the soil for the goldenrods to grow. The goldenrods blanketed the field like a solid sheet of waving, glittering sun. Their petals were made of pure, real gold, partly transparent, said to be the closest thing ever seen in any world to the purest celestial gold read of in the white scrolls. The people of Tainan used the golden flowers to trade with other dynasties and to create beautiful things, healing powders, and other magics. Each family paid annual tribute by offering a precious gift crafted from the precious gold. The previous Cuelda and her husband, those who've ruled for a year, those whose reign must end with the ushering in of mine and Shalom's, follow the dragons onto the field. The Cuelda shakes and sobs violently. Her cries twist my heart like someone has plunged a knife inside and turns it, making me want to vomit. She tries to run, but her husband, does anyone even know their names, catches her and holds her close. She struggles against his vain attempts at comfort before collapsing against him in defeat. I want to close my eyes, but I am suddenly unable. They deserve someone to watch, to share in their last moments. Right now, no one could possibly understand better, nor be more fitting to watch than Shalom and I. Despite the hundreds gathered, we are the only two left in their world. When the golden fields swayed, their petals clinked together as if they were singing. There was more than enough gold for all, both dragons and humans, enough to care for all Sulaimon and many worlds beyond. The Cuelda and her husband were appointed in an annual blessed ritual. Together they wove the goldenrods into fine things for all of Sulaimon. Together they were taught the ancient wisdoms of the Tainanian dragons, great magic and philosophies. Together they rejoiced in their pure joining of eternal love. Time passed, and this peaceful ritual repeated for countless ages. But then, the Colosseum was built. In their eternal thirst for knowledge and truth, the dragons began to study old magics, and the old traditions gave way to those both new and yet hideously ancient. One of the dragons reaches toward the young couple. They step forward, but the Cuelda is fighting against her husband again, screaming shrilly. Shouldn't we be past such things? Shouldn't someone try to stop this? The flowers died, drowning in the shedding of blood. At first, it was a subtle transition. The people hardly noticed at first, hardly protested. At first, only criminals were killed. Then, fate took a dark turn as the dragons decided it was a pure sacrifice they required each year. The ritual of the Cuelda and her husband was established, created from histories of legends centuries old. The next Cuelda was forced to weave star into gold to appease the dragon's new, unquenchable lust. The humans of Tainan would never touch or so much as see any of the gold spun by the Cuelda. They would be forced into poverty, struggling to survive. A pain of rage and hatred gripped me powerfully as I remember the first time I was forced to stand before the dragons. How they'd whispered words tainted with a false gentleness, as if totally ignorant of the horrors endowed on the day of my appointment. Their voices had been drenched with a sincerity as pure as their bristling snowy scales, but I had known that their pretended kindness was as frail as a morning's mist, easily dissolved with a kiss from the sun's palest glow. How could they impart their gift to me so calmly, as if the few shreds of gold I would spin for them in a year's time could wipe clean a slate drenched with years of red? They had breathed their tainted breath upon me, bestowing their gift to spin straw into gold, a gift they do not deserve. They deserve nothing but the horrors they now force upon this young couple, and, in a year's time, or less than that if we do not produce a child, Shalom in me. I shake my head, trying to erase the memories of the day I was appointed. My aunt's story, what is left of it, concludes in my mind. It is just as well that none saw the new gold spun by the Cuelda. The sight thereof would have broken their hearts, for it was not nearly as glorious as that grown in peaceful times. Now the gold, our lives, everything, is marred by the rubies. They lay the Cuelda beside her husband, binding her because she writhes like someone possessed. And she is, not of a demon, but of unbearable anguish and terror, especially as the baby is carried out by a priest and laid between her and her husband. How heartless that they could not even hold their own child in their last moments together. And yet, I understand why. The dragons feared their parents destroying their ritual before it was allowed to come to pass, as other parents had done before. The Cuelda's screams slice like 1,000 knives. I tremble all over, contorting with each shriek. Shalom squeezes my hand, but I am numb now to everything except her torment. The dragons release a thunderous, unified roar, signaling that it is time. Then, they bear down with bloodthirsty snarls, their claws and fangs gleaming like curved swords. Her husband finally loses his nerve and screams at the final moment. In a storm of blood, the young couple is silenced. The last, most heart-wrenching sound is the baby's cry, quieted too abruptly. The dragons of Tainan no longer require a simple tribute of gold. The field of sunlit gold has become the field of rubies. And that is where we are going to end our reading of Bloodmaiden. So some got pretty serious and dark there at the end. The dragons of Tainan, instead of requiring a peaceful tribute of their humans that they're sworn to protect, like the other dragon dynasties do, now require this sacrifice, this tribute of a sacrifice of blood of a young couple, and if they have a child, also their child. So this is the mess that Crisilin and Chalom have found themselves in. Of course, as I mentioned, and this is not a spoiler because it's mentioned in the blurb, they are going to try to escape. They're going to want to escape and go see if they can get the help from the other dragons of the other dynasties. But how are they going to do that? As you can see, their room, it would be difficult to get out. There's no windows. They're heavily guarded. And there are so many trials that they would have to surpass to even get out of Tainan, let alone find the other dynasties. What's going to happen? Are they going to escape? Are they going to make it out? Are they going to be able to bring this cruel ritual, this horrific ritual to an end? Well, of course, you can find out by reading the book for yourself. Bloodmaiden is available, as all of my books are, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in both paperback and ebook form, as well as ebooks on some other websites. And let me know what you thought of this reading down in the comments below. If you've read Bloodmaiden, what do you think of it? Again, no spoilers for the other readers. If you haven't read it, do you think it's thumbs up, thumbs down, something you'd be interested in reading or not? And if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe. Let all of your other reader friends know about my channel, especially if they're into YA fantasy, although we will be reading some other things as we go along, so that they can also discover cool new books to read. On that note, Happy reading, may you be inspired, and I will see you in my next video.